Hello, everyone, once again, welcome to Infinite Discoveries, where we explore world affairs, philosophy, history, the social and behavioral sciences, spirituality, arts, and culture with academics, scholars, activists, and visionaries. As always, we are your three happy hosts, respectively, Rich Brago, Miguel Rodriguez, and Aurobindo Mahapatra. If you want to put further faces to the names, feel free to visit our website, infinitediscoveries.org.
Hi, welcome. Welcome to Infinite Discoveries. And today we have with us Dr. David Purificato. After a life-altering accident, David Purificato could not continue in construction, so he enrolled at his local community college and earned an associate's degree in 2011. He then transferred to Stony Brook University, where he studied U.S. history, completing a BA, an MA, and finally a PhD in 2021. He's interested in U.S. cultural and social history and has a passion for studying objects that societies produce. Dave teaches U.S. history at Indian River State College in Fort Pierce and Port St. Lucie, where he advises two clubs, the Ethics Ball Club and Dungeons and Dragons Adventure Club. So welcome, Dave, to Infinite Discoveries.
Thanks for having me.
It's quite accomplishment you have, and we know each other for some time when at FSCJ. And so tell us something about your journey as a scholar, as an academician, and as an individual. So say something about your life story.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. About me. I'm fascinated about the way that people interact with each other and what objects say about that. One of the things that to give you an idea, one of the things that I do is I always wear a tie in class. I always wear a tie because I use it as a prop. I use it and I explain, like, as a professional, I wear a tie. It signifies something. It has a history. Because we talk about middle class development and, because I teach U.S. history, I teach both halves. But when we talk about the modern U.S. history and the Second Industrial Revolution, the solidification of the middle class, and then the expanded access after World War II to college, veterans, community college system opens up. So I try to connect these ideas to the real world for the students. I guess that's mostly what I do.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Other than that, I was a carpenter for a very long time, as you said, building houses.
So how did that transition came from being a carpenter for a long time to being a professor? So how did that transition happen?
Okay, so when I worked in construction, and it might sound a little weird, but when I worked in construction, I was well known. I had a really good reputation. I did very well. People that I worked with would often say I didn't belong there because I was always looking for ways to innovate, ways to change things, to make it easier, faster, improve profit. I was really, I would deep dive into the issues that we had. And then I was in a car accident and I wasn't able to be a carpenter anymore. So I went to my pastor and the pastor said, go back to school. Well, the thing about that is I didn't even go to high school. I came from a poor family and I went right to work. So that's why I was a carpenter for so long. I'm 60 now, and the last time I worked was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, worked in construction, and I was doing that for 26 years. So that gives you an idea. I was, when I was young. So she's like, go back to school. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. So all I did was I went to my community college, as you said, and I went in and I just applied all of the things I had been doing before. That, why does this operate like this? What's behind it? How is it connected? I finished my AA degree. I was this student of the year. I was the commencement speaker. And
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty wild that here I never even went to high school, and I go in and I have all kinds of awards, all kinds of stuff. But it's kind of embarrassing, a long list. And so I transferred to Stony Brook, and then in Stony Brook I finished my bachelor's degree, and the faculty there thought I should do the master's degree. So I transferred in, I graduated, and then I went into the master's degree. And then in the first semester, the professors are like, you don't belong here. You should be doing this. You should be in a PhD degree, a program. I mean, like right away, like they were like, you need to do that. And then so I finished the master because they wouldn't let you transfer in. So I finished the master's degree, and then I got into the PhD program. But the professors pushed me along the whole time. And the feedback I got mostly was because I really do engage. I want to get behind it. And I've had so many history professors tell me I'm a natural born historian. Want to get to the root cause.
So I think it chimed very well, Dave. So like when you say you were a carpenter for a long time, but you felt as if you didn't belong to that place because you wanted to innovate, you wanted to be creative, you wanted to challenge the dominant assumptions of the time. So I think perhaps that was a blessing in disguise that you have to transition to academics, because I think academics is richer because of you, because of your worldview, or because of your pedagogy to things.
Well, thank you.
So yeah.
I had when I graduated, I got this one award. I mean, I always feel like I'm bragging. I mean, it's just the truth. I got a whole bunch of awards. My name is in the program more than anyone else.
Wow.
When I was the AA and the BA, both of them. So, but I got this one award, and the reason I got the award because the professor said, and I never forgot this in my recommendation letter for the award, was that because remember, I didn't go to high school. So I bring a childlike fascination with the wisdom of how to get things done from my age. So I never forgot that. I try to, as one of our colleagues likes to say, that I'm like a puppy. I'm always going around looking for what I can do, what I can get into. What can I get into?
I think that's a great approach. It's a great, I think, way to see things or to approach things. And so do you think that kind of experience influenced your research in PhD, because you did on material culture of US history? So do you think there's a connection between your research and your life experience?
Well, yeah, growing up, I was, like I had said, we were poor. We were poor. And I was always fascinated why people were attached to things, like objects, like people, if it was up to me, I would have like that sparse bachelor pad, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like the guy who's got like for Christmas, his decoration is a branch on the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, a branch from a tree on the table. That would have Christmas ball on it. That would be me. I'm not really attached to objects and to possessions like that because I didn't have them. It wasn't something that made my life work. And so I always was fascinated by how people, something gets broken. I don't mean I don't have sentimentality for some things like presents people give me or something maybe that I worked really hard for. but this weird attachment to like losing an object is like losing a part of themselves. I always thought that was odd. So that's what drew me to material culture, that idea.
That's interesting. If I may, I'm just curious that, because I was thinking while you were talking about that, that the opposite might be true. That since you come from a non, I guess you'd call it a non-traditional background, wouldn't you?
Yes.
That particularly in fields where you're dealing with concrete things, which, again, most academics, it's just part of the Western culture, right? The academic world and scholarly training divorces you from the material more and more and more, right? You're in the realm of the abstract and ideas more and more, whereas your whole life were immersed in the world of practicality and things and how to manipulate them and do things with them. I just wondered if that had something to do with it as well on the positive side.
Oh yeah, I think you're definitely onto something with that idea. I don't know how many times I would be in class and things would happen and people would, and I'd be standing like, this is just weird. And they're all acting like it's normal.
Yeah.
And like, my world didn't operate that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, my students have told me many students have told me many times that my teaching style is very unconventional.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I was giving a quiz as it has to be interesting for me to do it. Otherwise, if it's not going to be interesting, I'm not going to be there. So I'm giving a quiz, and it's the first quiz of the semester, and the first question is true or false. Students have to follow the directions to get full credit. Second one is true or false. If you have a question, you should ask the professor. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
True or false. If you're not sure, the first thing you should do is look at the directions. Just simple, like let the students know. And then, I didn't do this the first day. I did it on the fourth day, and I do that intentionally because they start to get to know me. But the sixth question, and there's only six, the last one, was true or false. The professor is here to help. And I say that, and I have a picture of Grogu with the cup of coffee, and it says the professor is here to help. And when I read it out loud, I always go like this. I go, students will look at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, the professor's here to help, right? So I do stuff like that just to snap them into the moment.
Yeah, that's what you got. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Ultimately.
Yeah. And then we have a conversation about it. Then I get serious and I'm like, well, how can I help? What can I, when we don't do it. I shouldn't say I don't do it instantly, but once the quiz is over, then I take the quizzes and then we discuss each question.
Yeah. So
when we get to that part, it's like, the thing is, I'm here to help. I don't have to be there. I could be with my CV. It is likely, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but it's likely that I could work at a university. I have several publications, well accomplished, but I don't want to. I want to be at the community college. I want to have more students than like 2 classes, and then it's just research. I still do the research, I still do the writing, but I want to be focused on the students. Yeah. So I try to let them know that I want to be there to help them, but if they don't tell me they need help. Yeah. That's that whole thing. Basically, every single thing I do has an ulterior motive. It's got a structure. It builds on everything else. There's nothing random. So, and they think it is, the students.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it comes across that way, I'm sure, but in a way that's probably good. I just wondered too, do you find that, given your scholarly area of interest and the areas that you work in, does that particular, because I'm thinking, I've taught history courses. I've taught them at IRCC, as a matter of fact. Or did I say they'll give the wrong IRSC? When I was there, it was IRCC.
Right.
But obviously your own areas of interest kind of creep into the courses, even though because they're survey courses and you've got to focus them somehow. Do you find that they respond to your interests? Like, 'cause I would think material culture and all the different dimensions of what it means and is a great way to work through history with students, because it gives them something concrete they can really focus on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. And the way that I bring that into the courses, into the classroom, is through image analysis. So we look at images, primary documents, primary images, and we look at what's going on in the image.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What is happening? This drawing from 200 years ago. Well,
Yeah.
why did they draw that thing?
Yeah.
What does that represent?
Yeah.
And one of the things, the first day of every semester, the first day for every class, I bring up, it's a picture, it's a photograph of some cans with no labels. And I put text next to it so it's on the PowerPoint, and the text says, what is this image? No. What is this? And I tell them we're going to examine an image. And then I say, so they have the clues. Like it says, what does this represent? I'm sorry, what does this represent? I've been playing around with it, trying to fine tune it, and I think I'm there. What does this represent? It says that on the screen next to the photograph of cans. And then I say, and I usually walk up and I tap the screen. I say, what is this? And then students will say, well, those are cans. I go, no, it's not. And they're like, what, food? No. And they say all these things. And I go, when I tap the screen, I say, this is an image of cans. We're going to be looking at images. This isn't the actual thing.
Yeah.
So, and I do that intentionally to try to make them think, like, why we go through this exercise. What's the conclusion? And then I tell them that when a historian looks at an image of an object, the historian doesn't actually see the object. This historian sees the society that created it, the society that used it, maybe that it's being sold and traded around the world. What are those connections? How was it? What infrastructure made this possible?
Yeah.
That's the first day, and then everything follows from there, so that they connect to U.S. history and the changes in U.S. society.
Very, very interesting days. Very interesting. So, again, coming back to your research, you focused mostly on 19th century material culture, right? In your PhD.
Yes, that's my specialization.
Yeah, and now we are in 21st century. So do you see, because sometimes the historical studies are kind of confined to the past, but do you see any kind of relevance or implications of your research to our current times, particularly how the material culture plays out today? So do you see any connection between your research in the past and now?
Yes, I'm currently working on an article about dogs as objects. And I look at the changeover from dogs being predominantly working animals to when they start to become domestic animals for pleasure and objects and status symbols of the ability to have this animal that doesn't work. Right? Not on a farm. Now, well, if you have that, you have to be able to afford it, right? There's all these things that come with it, and then it's care. And the way that I'm seeing it connecting to today is, it seems, I could be wrong on this one, but it seems to me that there's been a rise over the last maybe decade of designer animals. Yeah. Like these crossbreeds of dogs that people have, like a Labradoodle or a, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really is this what I'm trying to look at is this culture around the dogs as objects, and then where it is today, it's still the same. It's really the same thing, because to have a designer dog, they're expensive.
Yeah. It
is a status symbol. And often they have medical problems that you have to pay for. I had a Chihuahua pug mix, a chug, Now the dog was given to us. Whatever, I wouldn't be paying like $2,000 for a dog. I'm not, that's just me.
Yeah.
When the dog was given to us, he was a little older, and they have a lot of medical issues because the breeding isn't to make the dog better, it's to make it look a certain way.
Mhm.
And that's all there is to it, and it causes
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. So again, because I come from political science background, I do work on politics, conflict resolution. So does this image perception or the how the images evolve, or how the people look at images or things, what kind of political implications of those kind of things? Does it have any political implication or economic, sociocultural implications?
In our current era, it seems like it is the most charged. So you could have somebody, let's say in 1830, looking at, like, this is like pre-photography, at a drawing, and it's a drawing, and they could question it, like, is it accurate? Did they really draw? Is that an accurate representation? Did they really draw what it says it represents? And then you get photography, and for a long time people just accepted it, and then of course people realize if you can manipulate photographs, you can sell them, and so then you start getting manipulation all the way back as far as the Civil War, faked battlefield photos, and they're selling them all the way through World War I. There were all kinds of fakes. Then people have become more skeptical, and then you get the movie industry, and people just accepted what they saw, and then they become more skeptical. So all the way up to today, but now in our era with deep fakes and the AI and everything else making these images that look real, like you look at it, and experts sometimes have a hard time figuring out
Yeah.
the authenticity of like a digital image that should not be able to be manipulated, but it is. So yeah, and that has huge political implications. So used to I saw a video of, it was a couple of years ago, Joe Biden, I forget what he was doing. He was doing something, and it wasn't like killing somebody or anything. It was just like,
yeah, it's fake
yeah,
video.
and it was like it was like making him look stupid, but it looked like it was real. I mean, it really looked it wasn't like, you can usually tell, but it looked real. And I spent a lot of time on research on that to figure out how real it was, and just because it was kind of terrifying. So, and then of course, even writing and competency, that all plays into the idea of, if AI is doing it, if technology is doing it, well, where are the people, and then what are the competencies?
Yeah.
And then and the political side would be, how does the government regulate that? Where is the government's role in authenticating things? And that's another whole entire right? Disinformation, misinformation. Who gets to decide what that is?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how well, you just, like, that's interesting about the focus just on dogs, sort of the image around dogs and the symbolism, what they represent. As it as it changes through time, you can see how it reflects, I guess, how the culture is transforming. And I guess you could focus on so many things for comparative historical contrast like that. I mean, I guess something like guns, I suppose, right? The symbolization of guns, right? Say from earliest, again, as the technology changed, I suppose that changed as well. But I suppose symbols like that have a fascinating trans-historical relevance as well, right?
Oh, can you hear him?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can.
Oh.
We got you now. We couldn't hear you for a second.
Yeah. Could you repeat what you were saying?
Well, we were in class yesterday, and we were looking at images, of the trans African slave trade, because I'm leading up to the transatlantic slave trade, and the transit African slave trade was there first, and the introduction of guns and what that did to the slave trade. So I was showing them images with the people, tied up and the slavers holding guns. So that's what, like the exercise with the cans is, the question is, well, what do we see? What objects are in the picture? What does it tell us? And they're wearing, the slavers themselves are African, but they're wearing Western style, European style clothes. They're carrying guns and tools, and the students, by now it's like we're in a couple of weeks, and we did it a few times, and they start picking up on those things. The political side is that a lot of students get uncomfortable talking about those sort of things. And I always tell them, I say, look, a lot of this stuff is politically charged. It's history, right? People have different ideas of it, but I'm here to just tell you what happened. And if studying what happened makes you uncomfortable, good. If you're not uncomfortable at some point, then I'm not doing my job. So I think, and actually a student came up to me after class and thanked me.
Interesting. When you do these things, what themes do you usually, what themes do you think are important? It's like, say, if you look at the course of American history from the 19th century through the 20th century, what are some of the big material culture themes that you think are important, have really affected the course of American history up to the present?
I could tell you that the way that I approach it, the most important thing is consumerism. Just consumerism, and then all its aspects, right? Because what are we consuming? Objects. Access to objects. I just bought a 75-inch TV. It's insane. It's gigantic. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, why do I have this? But because the industry made it so affordable, my wife didn't have a problem. It wasn't a lot of money. It was on sale, Christmas. I mean, really, and that's, we have, our standard of living has steadily increased. Steadily over, I'm talking the long durée, we're talking long over time, right? Not like this year to next year, but we're talking steadily increased.
Right.
And that is one of the themes that I want the students to understand, because I want them to understand, relating it to US history, relating it to the political culture, relating it to all the arguments that we have, the social, cultural, and political arguments, that there's a reason that millions of people are fighting to get into the United States. Our lifestyle.
75-inch screen TV.
that is a very good indicator, right? When a working class person, I'm not necessarily saying me, but when a working class person who doesn't make a lot of money could go buy a giant TV that is supposed to be a luxury item, that tells you something.
I think that's very interesting, Dave. So the standard of living has increased over the years. So again, looking from a materialist point of view, so can we argue that because of technology, because of development, because of new production, people have become more materialist? I was just kind of thinking from a larger philosophical perspective. So people are, like you pointed out, that the standard of living, it has become much better because of the new kind of things. So people have become more materialist. What do you think? More consumerist?
Okay. So two things. One, are you familiar with Carter's crisis of confidence speech? Jimmy Carter.
I've heard of that, but not much.
So I show it in class, because there's Carter. He's trying to motivate people, and he's giving this speech. He's sitting at the desk, and he starts going like this. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to get some of it right, some of it wrong. But basically, there's a problem in America today. People want things. Things rule their life. And he's hitting the desk. He's like, we have to get away from things. And this is in the 1970s. And then to today, there is a broad agreement across the political spectrum that the economy is one of the major motivators of American politics and who gets elected and who stays in office and who doesn't. Why? Because the economy allows the ability of people to buy things. So,
Yep.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are in class and we often talk about, because we go over the Second Industrial Revolution, we go over Ford's innovations and how Ford's ideas changed the way industries worked, not just cars, but across industries. All of these changes, and then the Depression, and people had to make do with less. They just had to, they had no choice. And then the prosperity post-war, right? So it really does come down to that that idea of people's material life, and it motivates them. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, it motivates politics. I mean, James Carville, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wonder if it was, and again, not as a counterpoint, but I mean, I suppose it was always that way, right? Same thing with dogs. I was thinking when you're talking about dogs, I was thinking, well, right in the 1800s, and again, you're the expert, but it seems to me, if you look at paintings and pictures, there were always certain kind of dogs that aristocrats seemed to have in their painting, the portraits and stuff like that, which indicates they were a status symbol back then, right? Breeds and stuff like that as well. And I was thinking the economy sort of was the same thing, right? Everybody voted for presidents based on how it was going to affect their material well-being, I guess. But I wonder if something fundamental has changed. The way it has manifested itself has changed.
Yes, absolutely. So from what I can see, it's like in the 18th century, early and in towards the end, presidents didn't run on elect me and you'll get more stuff.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? Presidents do that today.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder if would you say the key maybe transition was, and again, in the history of America, sort of socioeconomic history of America, that kind of the post-war progressive era through the early 20s. I remember this famous novel Babbitt by who the heck wrote Sinclair Lewis. This is from a history course I took in my because it was a popular novel about life in the 1920s, about this new suburban, again, a new form of life, this new suburban family, and how upwardly mobile they were and how status conscious they were. And it was all about, there was one famous line in the novel where his wife is trying to get him to go to church. And he says, well, that really doesn't matter anymore. The gods now are modern appliances, which I think sort of speaks to exactly what you're saying, no? And I don't know if do you think that was the transition period?
Volume is.
Yeah.
No, we're not hearing you, David.
Oh,
Now
There we go.
Now we can hear you. Yeah.
do I need to speak up?
No,
You'll
that's
probably
good.
get closer to the.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I don't know if I want my whole face in there. So, I was saying that I off the top of my head, I think that there are inflection points. So, the end of the 19th century with the rise of industrialization, all of a sudden standardization becomes a big thing, and it allows more people access. So that's a shift.
Yeah.
The 1920s, right? That's another shift.
Yeah.
And then for us, our current era, the 1950s, like you were pointing to, right?
Yeah.
50s going into the 60s, that's another shift.
Yeah.
We still have echoes of it. And one of it's really an interesting idea and point, because one of the things I try to get the students to look at, and I try to keep in mind, and I touch on it, I keep coming back to it in class, is when we look at this and we're talking about the 1950s, right? I have siblings who were born in the 1950s. There are people who were adults in the 1950s who are still alive. It's, you know, it's not that long ago, and we're still being influenced directly by the people who lived through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So we look at like the end of the 19th century. As far as I know, there's nobody running around that was born in 1890, right? Or even as an adult during that period. So it does, and it permeates society, you know. And what makes me think of that is I don't really use my phone, and people think I'm weird. They'll text me, I'll get back to them 3 days later because I'll put the phone down and I won't touch it, and then the battery dies, and then I'm like, hey, somebody was supposed to call me and they didn't. And I pick it up and I go, oh, it's dead.
But that happened to me a couple of times, right?
It happens all the time because I try not to get involved in getting sucked into the phone. But the young kids, to tell the students that this, I'm not exaggerating. A student was on their phone. This actually happened. I was giving the lecture. A student was on their phone, like in the front row. I stopped. I walked over to him and I said, you need to put your phone away. And the student looked up at me and said, okay, took the phone, put it in their pocket. Student was wearing a sweatshirt, put it in the pocket. And I said, now listen, I'm not trying to be hard on you. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but we're going over this. This is going to be on the test. You need to, and as I'm speaking, and the student does not break eye contact, looking at me, pulls out the phone while they're looking at me and starts like,
wow,
like right in front. And I'm like, what are you doing?
He was taking notes. I mean,
no. And then the student was like, oh, that's right. I'm like, this so, you know, and I do want to do a story about phones and the material culture around phones as objects. Just that from that perspective. A student said to me yesterday something about, asked me, why do people pay so much money for Apple phones? And without missing a beat, I said, because the company charges that because they know people will pay. So it's kind of like a self-defeating thing, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't selling, what would they do? They'd lower the price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, you know, you see your friends, they have an Apple, they have the latest Apple phone, you have to go out and get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just building on what Rich was talking about. So again, I always love comparisons. So like, and Rich was saying that modern appliances are gods. Like people are so much enamored by material things.
Right.
So I would like to know your reflections because you are an expert on this subject. So the people's relations between the material culture and their values or spiritual grounding, the kind of linkage in 19th century and today. So what kind of differences you see between the people's fundamental ideas, beliefs, values, and the materialist culture? Are they parallels or they are totally different? Or what are the nuances? If you'd like to say something about that.
You know, that is really interesting because when you touched on religion, and you can see throughout at least the last few hundred years that we have, I believe we have good records. And I'm going to extrapolate it without knowing, but to even earlier, the attachment of people to objects like crosses, right? Like that meant something. I mean, you can even go all the way back to where they thought that the idol itself, the object, had the God in it. We don't, as a culture, we don't really have that as a main. There certainly are people that still do, but it's not a main theme of our culture, that religious connection to those objects. At least from what I can see.
So
Does
Babbitt
that-
had a point then, I guess.
I'm sorry?
The guy in the novel had a point then, I guess. Religious symbols are no longer, is that what you're saying? That it's
Yeah.
modern appliances have become?
They get venerated. Exactly. They get venerated where a
Hmm.
cross or a crucifix or, any other religious symbols. Think of the Torah as an object, right? It would be within Jewish communities. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying that I see it from the research that I've looked at. There's a large segment of Jewish people who are less religious, especially in the United States, and don't venerate that as much as earlier generations.
So is there a factor there that some people, maybe few people, they want to go back to the kind of past ideas they want to divide? Is there a factor if you look at kind of political rhetorics or debates in our times, in recent times?
I've often wondered about that sort of thing in the context of how genuine is it, because you can see it, and there's often political motivation connected to it, but that's not the thrust. How genuine is that? I don't know. Because I always say, hopefully I understood the question. I always say there is no golden age. There is no time that we can go back to that was better. There is no time better than right now. Right now, and I'm not trying to minimize people's suffering in the world, because that's certainly happening. I'm not trying to minimize anybody's experience, except as a species, right? Humans as a species right now is the best time we've ever had. So this idea,
right? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Materially, that's certainly true. But I guess getting back to Aurobindo's point, do you think if we could even make such pronouncements, do you think spiritually we're better off? This is the best time ever? Or maybe just are people happier now, do you think, than they were 100, 200 years ago?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Because how do you gauge spirituality? Is it adherence to a church? Is it being kind to other people? Is it, karma?
Yeah.
The way I'll try to sum it up like this, and this is the way I talk about this very subject in class. 200 years ago, if there was a natural disaster in Tahiti, right? Island isolated somewhere, and were the typhoons? They don't have hurricanes, they have like typhoons, right?
Yeah.
Comes through and just levels the place, and all of their tools or whatever it is that they have, their way of living is thrown into chaos. And who's coming to help them? Today, if it happens, will the UN go and help? Will the United States, will people consider helping them? Will people donate money to help? So where does the spirituality as spirituality, where does it end and where does it begin? And because to me, the idea of a group of people that are totally disconnected from another group of people, seeing their plight and helping them, that is a spiritual act.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Aurobindo? You asked the question to begin with.
Yeah, I'm still thinking. So it's kind of, so do you see them in contradictions, or they're kind of the material culture and spirituality, or I would say core universal values of religion? So they're kind of antithetical, they're kind of contradictory to each other, or they are separate, or they complement. What do you think?
Oh man, this is tough. You have this idea of, I'm going to pick on the Catholics. You have this idea of the Catholic Church talking about quoting Jesus, as an itinerant, right? Jesus not owning stuff, like you shouldn't worry about all of that. You should worry about God's kingdom. while extracting money and living wealthy, while extracting wealth from the people that they're telling they shouldn't worry about that. And then you go to the Vatican and it's like unbelievable wealth. So that's the thing. I mean, I would like to think it goes back to this idea of happiness or satisfaction, even, right? I mean, one of my problems, that's a terrible word to use, but it is. One of my problems is that I want people to succeed. I want them to come into my class. I want them to be successful, and I want them to succeed. And I worry that, I've actually, this has been a topic of conversation that I've been talking to my peers about. Sometimes it interferes with our ability to let them fail because they need to fail. You know, and is that bad? That we, you know, looking at, and you know, that's what I'm wrestling with. So yeah, that this idea of spirituality, religion, and you know, I mean, I want them to succeed. I want them to be happy, and I don't want anyone to go through what I went through when I was young. Go get an education, get a job, just provide for you know. I guess that just comes from my background.
And does that have a connection with, I think you wrote at some place, you want your students to be better people than just suitable for jobs. So how does that distinction, because you were talking about you want them to succeed, right? But at the same time, you want them to be better people, not just
Right.
jobs, right?
So how do we define that, right? How do we define that? That's really the question. And that's something I wrestle with, you know, and it just seems to me, if someone, here's the thing. If there is let's say a wealthy person donates a lot of money, they go and they do all this philanthropy. Okay, they're being nice. But a better person to me is the person that gives when it is hard, not when it's easy. They help when it's hard to do, not when it's easy to do. And that's what I hope this, you know, to see that. One thing I tell the students is, and I really do try to live by this, and it's very difficult. We're all in this together. And by that, I mean, we are literally all in this together. It's not a metaphor.
I like that spirit. That's great. That sounds great, but when applying that to practicality, it is suddenly not that easy, right?
Exactly. It is hard. You know, we all have responsibilities. I have responsibilities to my family. There has to be a point where I have to, you know, and that's what I mean. Like, that's where it's that tension between wanting to do these. You know, I've had conferences, Zoom conferences with students at 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning, because they worked and they couldn't make it any other time. So I'm trying to help them, but then at the same time, you know, my family is in the other room. So, you know, it's that tension. And I guess we just all have to try to do the best we can, right?
So living an ideal life isn't easy, right? It is
not at all. You know, as long as when I'm gone, nobody has to remember me. I'm serious. It's not like I'm trying to get a statue or something. But as long as I made the world a better, no, seriously, as long as I made the world a better place in some way, I'll be happy. That's all.
So that's what you talk about, resiliency, something like that. Do something.
Right. Right. Exactly. No matter what your situation is, I think that people can do. You know, you have. I'm always amazed. When I was graduating from Stony Brook with my bachelor's degree, I was one of the banner bearers. So they have each department. The department picks somebody, and you walk with this pole, and it's got the banner of the department during the procession, right? So it's like a little honor, but it's like, okay, this is our student. We're putting from our department. We're putting this student out for everybody to see. So I was doing that. Another department had a student who was a paraplegic graduating. And I'm like, oh my God, look at this. Here's this person in this situation, but they're still doing it.
Mm.
You know, that really impressed me. They're still doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, anytime after that for years, anytime I was, you know, feeling down, overwhelmed, I just thought about that. I'm like, you know, I can do this. Stop feeling sorry for yourself.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I pay attention. I think that's another, you know, people know I pay attention to everything that goes on around me.
Yeah.
And that's a side effect. Actually, that's a side effect of a violent background.
Yeah.
I
So,
agree. I mean, to have great ideals and to practice those ideals, the two different things, right? So,
oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I do. You know, I do want to make a difference. I don't want to be the difference. I want to make a difference for people, even if it's small. You know, I mean, I had a student come up to me once and say, you know, an older student, I'm not looking for this, but it does. I mean, like all of us, you get that little bit of positive confirmation that, you know, you're doing something that's helping somebody. I had an older student come up to me and say, you know, when I came back to school, this is when I was in the master's program at Stony Brook, and it wasn't one of my students, but it was another student, older student that was in a club that I was a part of. And the student came up to me and said, you know, I was terrified. I was terrified about coming back to school at my age. They were like 35. And I say that like I'm brushing it off because I'm decades older than that. You know, like I was terrified, and I saw you. And I was like, they said to me, they said, look at this old guy, and he's doing everything. And I was like, yep. You got the old guy part right.
it's very interesting.
So yeah, that makes it different. You know, it's like just
Yeah.
doing whatever it is I was doing. The students saw that and wanted to emulate it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a very practical man, you know, doing things practically, you know.
I try. I don't like to waste. I don't like to waste energy. I don't like to waste time. You know, we're all. I'm going to go out on a limb here, but we're all a little bit older, right? So when I say this, don't take it the wrong way. But when I look at it, is I literally do not have that much time left. I don't know if you noticed the gray. I only got my PhD a couple of years ago. I don't have that much time left, so I'm on a mission to get something done, to put my energy out there into the world, because I don't have that much longer to do it in this way. You know, maybe 15 years, maybe. I'm hoping I have 15 years, and I mean, even if I live past that, I'll be I don't know, be trying to get in the classroom.
No, I like your spirit, Dave. I absolutely appreciate, admire your spirit. So like that reminds me, Gandhi. Gandhi said famously that learn as if you were a student forever, and live as if you will die today. So I can see that spirit in you, and so
You know,
yeah.
you made me think of something. I just want to say that my wife and I try to keep that in mind. Our friends and family do think we are odd, because if either one of us leaves the other one's vicinity, even if it's for 5 minutes, like let's say I'm going to go up to the corner store and come back, we always kiss each other, because you don't really know if you're ever coming back. This idea that, like, you know, this could all be over today.
So it's like living in the moment. So living in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that itself is a great message. That itself is a great message. Like, because usually people think about what will happen tomorrow, maybe after years. They don't think what is going on now. living in the present. I think that itself is a powerful message. So, I mean, he made me thinking. Like I'm thinking and thinking and thinking. I'm listening to you. So it's a great message, Dave. And really personally, I know you for the last maybe about 3 years or 3, 4 years, and
Mhm.
and he taught at FSCJ. We have, in fact, Miguel and Rich, we had the office rooms just next to each other
Oh, all right. Yeah.
at the college, and so we used to chat a lot. So great. Rich, you want to say something?
Gosh, I don't know. I hate to, that was like the perfect note to end a inspiring, profound note to end an interview on. I don't know. I hate to follow it up with anything trivial. I don't know if Miguel wants to add or delete anything from the proceedings or not.
David, I do have a question for you. I after Monday, uh January 20th, the inauguration, 2025 of Donald Trump, I see America propaganda. The symbol is going to be one of those new Teslas, those things that look like kind of mini tanks.
Yeah.
That's we're talking about consumerism and everything. And that's like I think the perfect symbol, for the new what I call new age before us. What what is um because I studied a little bit in grad school, Nazi propaganda, communist propaganda, and everything. And America always had its propaganda, from as benign as Norman Rockwell, you know, to
Right.
Andy Warhol in a sense, and even though they were artists, but sometimes artists used as well as propaganda.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So my question to you is, what is American propaganda look like to you in the years ahead?
Oh, wow.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a rough one. Gotta think. So one of the things I always try to do in my classes, we look at a lot of propaganda. We look at a lot of propaganda, and I always preference it with the students, and I always insist because the exercise is find the part that's true. Because good propaganda has truth in it. I'll give you an example. So there's this World War II poster that I like to look at, and it's a war bonds poster. It's to get people to buy war bonds, and there's 3 children. They're out in the backyard. You can see the little fence in the background. They're playing, and there's the shadow from above coming down onto the children, and it's a swastika. And it's like, donate money, protect the children. And so I always ask the students, is there really a giant swastika coming after them? And they're like, no, there's no giant swastika flying around in the sky going to come and get them. And then I asked them, well, do we think these 3 children are real people? And some students will say they could be, maybe it's modeled after children. And we say, well, we don't know. And then I always ask them, during World War II, were the Nazis actually a threat to American life? And their answer is usually yes. That's the truth, right? They're taking something and it's propagandized, but there's, and it's sussing it out. And I always tell them, dismissing propaganda is a mistake. You do it at your own peril. Because especially if it's good, there's something in there that's hooking people in. So the problem with trying to think about this for the future for me is we often talk about, in our society, we talk about democratic systems. Well, what happens when the society democratically wants something that's arguably not in its best interest. If it's a true democracy and it's a true democratic system, then they get it. So, I mean, that's all I can say.
What are some examples of contemporary propaganda through imagery or other material symbols that we see all the time, do you think, that's relevant to the political situation, for instance, going on?
Well, because the inauguration hasn't happened yet, it's difficult. You know, there's a lot of projection about what will happen. And I always say, well, we have to wait and see what does happen, especially with politics, because politics is mostly promises and words and saying what people want to hear. Almost, I don't know of any president that actually administrated the way they ran. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, sure.
So we need to wait and see.
I mean,
but
one thing I noticed, again, back to the sort of the gun issue, I noticed that the a lot of Republican candidates, I'm sure everybody's noticed this during the campaign season, who were running this last election, were constantly posing with guns, right? I remember, you guys remember this Dr. Who was the guy on Oprah? Dr. Oz. You guys remember him?
Yeah.
I remember he ran for a Senate seat or something like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Right,
he never
Pennsylvania.
I mean, he was all his campaign ads had him out in the woods with a gun. I never associated with him like that before. But so that seems to me that's a material symbol that's actually trying to convey a very important message, right?
Yes. So when we look at it, though, the important thing to remember is who is it aimed at? And then if that message of this politician with a gun connects with the actual constituents, is it wrong? I mean, in a democracy, then, right? If you have democracy, then if that's what those people want, that's what they get. I don't know if that's being too practical, but
it's utilitarian, certainly, right? It's the utilitarian reason.
Well, if it's not a free society and we don't work under democratic systems, then some other state and or force would have to stop it. And that is undemocratic.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, humans are not very nice people.
Yeah, I think we can debate on that. That is typical Hobbesian Machiavellian view, but also there are counter views. So
right.
Well, again, remember, don't forget my background.
Yeah.
Where I come from, actions had consequences.
Yes.
Directly. You know,
every action has a reaction. So Newton's law. So.
Well, David, before we end, you did mention violent background. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that.
So one of the things about, and this is not, you know, it's not really about me or even my childhood, but one of the things studies have shown, poorer people have more violent lives. So that's why I always, you know, I remember fighting with my brothers and sisters over what today we would both call scraps. And I don't mean arguing, like fighting. So that's what, you know, very, it was violent because there were limited resources. So also personally, I did not get involved. I did the way that my brothers did. Two of my brothers were in prison. All four of them went to jail. I did not. I saw that and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I saw their mistakes and I did not make those mistakes. Just to give you an idea of what I mean by that, like this, you know, I came from a poor neighborhood. I've been shot at. I've had loaded guns in my face. I've had people screaming and threatening me. Not in the last, well, not in the last probably 40 years. Ever since I got big. Ever since I got big and imposing, people tended to not mess with me.
So there is an advantage of being big, right?
I like to, and also when when you come from that, like I said, I'm very observant. It's only recently, in maybe the last 10 years, that I can sit in a restaurant with my back to the door. I could not do that. If I was in a public place, I had to see every single person that came in. And that just from that type of upbringing, it's a common thing. If you look it up, it's common. Sociologists, psychiatrists, just one of the things they study. When I was younger, I could pick out a conversation in a crowded room. I could zone in and pick out a conversation in the room and tell you exactly what the people were saying. And that's the fight or flight. That's the self-preservation, and that's why I became so observant of people's behavior. So in a lot of ways, you could say the material culture was the side effect of that self-preservation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's why when I was saying before about like being in situations and watching how people behave and thinking that it's so bizarre. I distinctly remember seeing people arguing and screaming at each other, and then turning to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and saying, "When are they going to start throwing punches?" Because in the world I came from, if you were willing to scream in somebody's face, there's punches getting thrown. And again, that's all ancient history. I'm an old man now. No punches.
Punches in the intellectual sense.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's what I love to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Parry, get into that intellectual argument there. Get dirty, not dirty, but get down in it, right? And what I mean by dirty is down in it, like a farmer in the ground. Get into it.
Yeah.
Get your hands dirty. Do the hard conversations. Absolutely. Just to go back to that idea of the projection. When I look at it, when I try to look at our current era with all of the tension and all of the problems, I have hope, and I
like that.
I don't look at it negatively, and the main reason is because, do you remember when Matt Gaetz and who was the speaker?
Mike Johnson?
No,
Kevin
before
McCarthy. Kevin
Yes.
McCarthy. Yeah.
Yes. Remember when they got into an argument on the floor and it was in the news for like a cycle?
Yeah.
People are like, "Oh my God, look, they're yelling at each other." In my classes, I'm always talking about when on the Senate floor, people would pull out guns and try to shoot each other. Where on the Senate floor, they pull out knives. Where on the Senate floor, they would be in fistfights. Or as the most famous, Sumner, right? Almost beaten to death with a cane. Today, people see an argument and they're like, "Oh my God." And I'm always like, it's still better. I mean, what are you comparing that to?
Yeah.
It was not uncommon, in the early republic for representatives to kill each other.
Yeah.
I think
Burr
he might
and
be
Alexander Hamilton, right?
the most famous one. Exactly. And that's just the most famous one.
Yeah.
It was common. Affairs of honor. They would have these duels and kill each other. I mean, and then it becomes assaults. And then now it's a shouting match, and it's like, oh my God. But one thing, I'm going to say something a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. They're literally, Congress is supposed to fight with each other and argue. That's what they're there for. That's what they're there for, to go fight and argue over the issues.
Yeah.
They're not there to agree on everything.
Yeah.
Right? In
That's
this
true.
large, giant, diverse country, they set up the system so that they could go and fight about it, and then not fight in the fisticuffs sense or the knives, but fight over the resources.
I think that is the beauty of democracy, right? Because we debate, we argue, we discuss, we make dialogues. So that's the beauty of democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to remember that anytime I see, and that's I do when I see something and I disagree with it. I'm getting really good at this. At least in my opinion, I'm getting good at this. When I disagree, I ask myself, why do I disagree? And sometimes I find that the reason I'm disagreeing is silly, and other times I find that the reason I'm disagreeing has merit.
Yeah.
Rather than just jumping to a conclusion. I wonder how much of that comes from being in the classroom and being a mediator between students. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it helps. Yeah, I think it fundamentally alters your mindset if you're trained to do that year after year. Yeah.
Wow. It's
So,
all
yeah.
fascinating conversations. Fascinating. It is.
So I did want to mention, we had talked about like a good book that if you're interested in material culture and the kind of thing I'm talking about and what I'm really interested in and seeing it is Blue Jeans by Dan Miller. And what he looks at is how blue jeans are this ubiquitous item all around, and they're like all around the world and people wear them. And it's the great leveler, right? Like you see people wearing blue jeans, you go someplace, it's like, oh, this is a regular person.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work that way. It's an argument because there are the genes themselves are signifiers, and a signifier at different levels, and different brands of genes signify different things.
True.
And one of his arguments is that, and I really like this. When we did the Constitution Day talk, I talked about this, the pressure from the bottom.
Yeah.
In things like fashion and culture, we often look at elites and how their ideas, their lifestyle trickles down. The TV is a good example, right? Wealthy people could buy the big giant TVs until they became affordable, and they become affordable because manufacturers know if they can make it affordable, people who with less means are going to buy them. So that's the type of cultural and technological and economic trickle down, not wages, but jeans actually go the other way, because so many people are wearing them, wealthy people start wearing them. It's not the other way around. It's that the regular people are wearing them.
Yeah.
So he points out, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to me because you have all this money, you have a choice of whatever you want, but then these people, they put on jeans so they could go out in public and not be signaled out. Where in the 19th century, in the 18th century, they would put on their best, most fancy clothes to be singled out.
Yeah.
And today it's the opposite. But if you're wearing a $10,000 pair of jeans, you blend in with everybody else with jeans, but who knows you're wearing a $10,000 pair of jeans? Another wealthy person that knows the brand, that knows the cut. So they're signaling not only sameness, but they're able to differentiate themselves at the same moment.
Interesting.
So these normal, ubiquitous, everyday objects.
Yeah.
Those are tells you a lot about a society. And the one I looked at in particular was the bookcase. And I see the bookcases in the background, and that has become the professor go-to.
Rich.
Yeah.
I'm not at home. If I was, there would be
Books.
But yeah, that's and now it's people have all these books, they don't read them, but why do they have them?
They decorate a room very well.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Very, very fascinating conversations. Very rich, fascinating. In fact, we discussed a lot of stuff, right? There are a lot of things. A lot of things to think about. A lot of things to think about. Yeah. So thank you, Dave, so much.
Thank you.
Oh,
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Great meeting you.
oh yeah, I'm glad to finally had this opportunity to talk. And thank you very much for giving me, the actually spurring me to think about a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. Because it's always on the back of your head, like when during the day, but then it's good to bring it up to the fore and really, and then you can assess. So
Thank
especially,
you for coming. Yeah, thank you. It's a great privilege. And I think we discussed a lot of stuff in a very democratic, elegant way. And it was helpful to judge our own thought and to kind of engage our ideas in a very positive way. So
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it myself.
thank you.
I would love to do it again. As
Welcome.
you know.
Most
We
welcome.
will.
Yeah.
Oh, we definitely will. We definitely will. Thank you so much, Dr. David Purificato, for gracing us with your presence and honoring us with a wonderful discussion. And we also thank our co-hosts, Dr. Aravinda Mahapatra and Dr. Richard Grego and Miguel Rodriguez. I'm not a doctor, but I do play one on TV. And like and subscribe on YouTube. Do you have your ID? Well, it's Infinite Discoveries. So we also have a website, infinitediscoveries.org. Till next time, folks, take care. Bye.